You can upload. You have the mic there.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready?
You got your boxing gloves ready?
No hugs.
Wait, put your phone away. Come on, no cheating, no notes. Come on,
What are
that's
you talking
cheating.
about?
That's
It's
cheating.
a
No
debate.
hugs
We get
allowed.
notes.
Thank you for coming, guys. So on my right, we have Lane, an OG Bitcoiner, Ethereum core dev, now working on AI and governance at Near, and Marek, founder of Silo and co-founder of Self Protocol 2. We're happy to have him because he have 1,000 talks right now at FCC in many side events. So thank you for coming. So we're talking about rollups. We already had Ilya and Justin talking about sharding versus rollup.
I heard a rumor that Ilya won on the near side, despite the fact that this is an Ethereum event, so it's pretty good to hear from me.
Yeah.
I don't think that streak will continue, though.
So let's start wide. Are Ethereum rollups or rollups in general parasitic or symbiotic to the L1 in their current state right now? What do you think?
Is that my side of the debate?
Your side of the
Should we
debate?
switch it up just to keep it agile?
You can open and I'll close.
All right. So let's rewind a little bit, right? So when I was working on Ethereum back in the day, back in 2017, 18, 19, rollups were a new idea at the time, right? We started obviously with just mainnet, with just a single namespace, with a single network. Apps worked composably, right? You could deploy something. You didn't have to, have many different networks in your MetaMask, in your wallet. Everything just kind of worked seamlessly. So we could talk about the economic piece, but even before we do that, I would say to keep things spicy, one of the main issues is that rollups broke composability of apps, and I would say had a very severely negative impact on the user experience of using Ethereum, right? Because again, now as a user, I have to manage accounts across many different chains, different rollups. I have to keep track of where I have those assets. As a developer, I have to deploy my app in many places. And obviously, there is an alternative, which is like the near vision of a sharded network where you don't have to worry about this, or the Solana vision of like a single integrated network. So that's the first argument I'd make against rollups, right? Is that they break composability and they damage UX.
Small interruption. Just before I forget, you can vote by scanning the QR code, and we'll elect a winner at the end.
Well, don't vote yet. Okay, so on the ballot today is whether or not rollups are good for Ethereum or bad for Ethereum. And I'm going to argue that obviously rollups are great for Ethereum. I think there's been a lot of talk about, are they parasitic? Are they symbiotic? I'm going to argue actually that they are mutualistic. Mutualistic means that both sides benefit from each other. And if Ethereum is benefiting from rollups, then clearly they are good for Ethereum. Certainly rollups benefit from Ethereum's unrivaled security, right? Everyone loves Ethereum security. There's no other chain out there that can compete. And then likewise, Ethereum benefits from the increased network effects, from the fact that each chain is using ETH, which then perpetuates the ETH is money meme, and ultimately also the optionality to earn more fees from these rollups down the road. Now, my opponent here today, Lane, who was at the Ethereum Foundation back in the day, but left Ethereum to go to Space Mesh and now Near, he's going to argue, of course, that Near is the best. There's no reason to use rollups because they have sharded designs, and that Near is the future. But what he will fail to tell you is that Near has only on the order of 200 validators. Ethereum has 1 million validators. And so to argue that this is somehow in any way better than what exists today, certainly from a security perspective, I think is just ludicrous.
Okay, let's talk about security. You brought up security. I agree. I think this is a good starting point for this conversation. So I want to make 2 points. The first is the million validator number that you cite. That is kind of a headline number in Ethereum, and it's true if you go to look at the beacon chain statistics, you'll see that there's on the order of 1 million validators running in Ethereum. But who's actually running those validators? That's the question I would ask. And the reality, obviously things have changed with the most recent upgrade, right? But it used to be the case that a single validator could only support 32 ETH, right? We have the new max effective balance, right? So that's changed recently. So the point I'm getting at is if you're Coinbase, and you're operating and you have millions of ETH staked, you're going to be actually operating many, many thousands of those validators, right? So yes, while you have this million headline number, that belies a much higher degree of centralization on the back end. So I don't know what the actual number is, but in terms of the actual number of independent entities who are actually involved in operating Ethereum validators, it's more than 200, I agree with that, but I think it's closer to 200 than a million. That's the argument I would make, but we don't know, okay? Second point on security, because you mentioned rollups, and you mentioned the fact that rollups benefit from Ethereum security. There's some truth to that, right? And I also agree that Ethereum, second only to Bitcoin, is the most secure network out there. The issue is let me finish. The issue is...
Is that even actually debatable? Come on.
If we had more time, we could have that debate too. Maybe we can make room for that next year. It's a good debate to have, right? The issue here is the devil's in the details, right? And not all L2s are created equal. I think you'll agree with that. We have our friends at L2Beat who have done a lot of work establishing some criteria, right? And you can actually see which rollups are stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, et cetera. And the reality today, at this moment, still, after 5 years of rollups being designed and built and deployed, is that most of them are kind of glorified multi-sigs, right? And what I mean by that is if the sequencer were to go offline tomorrow, you would have no recourse as a user to withdraw your funds. So yes, in theory, rollups can benefit from the powerful security of Ethereum, and it's certainly possible if they're designed in such a way to have an escape hatch, to have decentralized sequencers, et cetera. But the reality is most rollups are not there today.
Boring. We know that rollups can be made more secure. Everyone is working on that. L2Beat has been pushing everyone to get to stage 1. Stage 2 is around the corner. This is supposed to be a satirical debate. Let's keep this more fun.
Keep it more fun. That's fair.
Clearly, Ethereum is benefiting from this rollup-centric roadmap. We have this capitalistic model where everyone gets pulled in and they launch their own new rollups. It's very different than this top-down, almost communist approach that Nir is taking for sharding design, where you don't get to launch your own shard. You're forced to let the overlords decide which contracts run on which shards. Clearly, Ethereum is benefiting more from rollups. I mean, after all, if we didn't have this rollup-centric design, then we wouldn't have had yesterday's amazing Robinhood, very highly produced beach wedding announcement. And clearly, that's a benefit to Ethereum.
Let's come back to the core of the topic and the relationship between the L1 and the rollups. Do you think they are freeloading, benefiting from the Ethereum marketing branding? Could they be bringing more value to ETH than just using some ETH?
I think at this moment, so we'll talk about economics a little bit. I think from an economic perspective, it's clear that L2s are extracting more value from Ethereum, from the Ethereum brand, the Ethereum community, from events like this, and from the Ethereum chain itself than they are contributing back to the chain. I think the math is very simple. I think if you look at the fees that are being collected by Ethereum mainnet, right, relative to the amount that's being collected in fees and earned by the L2s collectively, I mean, the most obvious example here is Base, which is making millions of dollars every day. It seems obvious to me that they're extracting value, and that the reason that this is happening, quite frankly, is a failure on the part of the Ethereum mainnet designers, researchers, core developers, et cetera, to get the economics right. Simply speaking, Ethereum is not charging enough for data availability, and it's actually become even cheaper, right, with the introduction of blob space, the expansion of blob space recently. And so, yeah, I think it's important that that L2s pay their fair share, right? I'm a New Yorker, and just this is not a perfect metaphor, but we have subways and buses, we have the MTA in New York, and the whole system is in shambles, right? It's falling apart, service is down, it's a terrible system. Air conditioning doesn't even work in the summer. It's just what's the word for it? It's a tragedy of the commons situation, right? And it's a hard problem to solve, but it's a similar situation with Ethereum. We have a tragedy of the commons where we have these L2s that are quite frankly parasitic, right? That are extracting value.
Mutualistic.
They're not paying their fair share.
Mutualistic. Well, it's interesting that you talk about fees. So it's true that the base blob fee is quite low right now, but that's ultimately decided on by the Ethereum community, by Ethereum core developers through rough consensus, and that can change at any time. That is not actually what ultimately is on the ballot today. But even if it were, Uniswap has been charging $0 in fees ever since its launch. The DAO has continued to choose to keep those fees low. They've been prioritizing growth over charging fees. Ethereum is doing the same, right? We are growing network effects for Ethereum. And ultimately, in the long term, I have high conviction that that is the right choice. But if you go back to Uniswap, are you saying that somehow Uniswap users are parasitic to Uniswap? It makes no sense.
I'm not intimately familiar with Uniswap's economics. I mean, I would say that to the extent that you have users on Ethereum, I mean, and they're indirectly, even if they're on an L2, like a Unichain L2 or whatever, they're still kind of indirectly Ethereum users, and they're not paying their share for security. I mean, it works until it doesn't. That's kind of the problem, right? That it's just not sustainable economically. And I think it has to start from the bottom. I think we have to kind of set a sustainable economic, fee model at the base layer, right? So that Ethereum itself is charging L2s, and then L2s can choose to pass those fees on or not to their users. And so if Uniswap decides to subsidize the use of the chain, or if Base decides to do that, or anybody, Celo, it doesn't matter, that's totally fine, right? That's up to them. But again, from the perspective of the core protocol, there has to be a sustainable fee model.
Sure, but we can also prioritize growth. Try to lock in as many network effects, close Robinhood, right? Robinhood came to Ethereum, it didn't go to Solana. All that is good.
Well, it came to Arbitrum.
Yeah,
is that the same?
Of course. Everyone's going to be paying for gas with ETH. People are going to be using ETH for as money on these chains. I think this is all great. You have composability between these chains. All that creates more network effects. All that is really good for Ethereum. But I want to go back to a point you made earlier about how somehow these L2s are taking advantage of Ethereum events like this one. If you look at the sponsor page, as far as I can tell, L2s seem to be paying their fair share. In fact, I would argue that because of L2s, there is more capital coming into Ethereum. Certainly more capital coming into these types of events, certainly more merch, certainly more parties, certainly more fun. Why are you here even? Why are you not at a near conference? I would say it's probably because these are way more fun, and I would argue that this is because of the roll-up-centric model. Clearly, Ethereum is benefiting. And we're benefiting from having you here too, because we like you.
Thank you. I like you too. I'm also happy to be here. Never want to miss these events. Ethereum events are the most fun. I agree. Look, take it from someone who goes to a lot of Bitcoin events, a lot of Near events, a lot of Solana events. I've never been, kind of married to any one particular chain or community. I think Ethereum events are the most fun. I agree with your point about there being more capital, more investment dollars coming into the ecosystem. I agree that, the kind of roll-up-centric roadmap has had a role to play here. But I think there's a bigger question and something bigger at stake. And that question is kind of like, what is it that unites us all together? And the reality today is if you do go to, I'll leave Near out of it because I'm very biased, but I'll talk about Solana instead. If you go to a Solana event, if you go to Solana Breakpoint, which is their version of DevCon, you'll see something very different than what you see here, right? What you'll see is every seat full in the events, right? And I don't mean to highlight that as the only example here, but generally, there's a lot less fragmentation, a lot less social fragmentation, and there's kind of a feeling, which, to be honest, I felt in the early days in Ethereum, right? If you went to DevCon 3, DevCon 4, it felt like that, or ECC 1, ECC 2. There was a lot less kind of competition, a lot less fragmentation, a lot less different kind of individuals and companies kind of pulling in different directions, and a feeling that we're kind of all in this together, and we need to kind of be in the same space together. And it's interesting because that is also the topology of the Solana network, right? That it is integrated. Right? Monolithic, as some people like to call it. And you both physically have people in the room together. You have people who agree on a core vision and a core set of values, right? Which, as Toli likes to put it in Solana, is, what does he say? Anything that reduces latency and increases throughput is Solana aligned. And anyway, long story short, we're lacking that in Ethereum. And I think that the roll-up-centric roadmap has contributed to this kind of social fragmentation. And I wonder if you think there's anything we can do to become more socially aligned. It's not just about having fun. It's not just about spending money. That's my point.
I don't know. I think the Ethereum community is very aligned. But I do think that through the roll-up-centric roadmap, we do get to have different communities all coming together, and I think that is a huge advantage to Ethereum. It can attract degens who want to transact on Base and Arbitrum. It can attract regens who want to transact on Celo. All of these different disparate communities can all come together and live in the same ecosystem and create value for Ethereum. I think that's really, really compelling. And looks like we're out of time, so I'm just going to quickly close. I think at the end of the day, I'm surprised you're not actually, shilling Near more. I would have expected you to talk about, these sharded design, blah, blah, blah. But, at the end of the day, Near has only 200 validators. And worse yet, because shards send messages to other shards in a way that can only be validated through other Near validators. If there's fraud, only Near validators can actually contest that fraud. That means that only 200 validators are needed to collude with each other to literally steal money from people's accounts. You can forge messages to steal money from people's shards. That breaks the fundamental, most important tenet of blockchains, which is that you don't need to trust. You can verify. You can run a full node and see that no one is stealing your money. You can actually do that with Near. With Near, literally 200 validators can collectively together.
Okay, all right, let me respond.
That was a vicious attack, so
yeah,
respond in 20 seconds.
I think I can do that because this is a super easy thing to respond to. So first of all, with respect to getting 270 validators to collude, have you ever tried getting 3 or 4 crypto people to even agree on anything? It's harder than it sounds. I think it's sufficiently decentralized. But even more to the point, my response would be, in the Ethereum ecosystem, the alternative to having shards is instead you have glorified multi-sigs, right? You have bridges, which quite frankly are completely garbage. And it's much easier to collude and steal funds on a bridge. We see them hacked constantly, much easier there than it is in the sharded model, which I think is sustainable.
I'm ringing the bell. Gling, gling, gling.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's check out the results.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys. That was a great fight. And for the moment, it's a tie. Oh, it's a tie. Thank you.
I'll take it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, guys. I'll let you out of the ring.